Jim Jones, a legendary figure in the world of hip-hop, has been caught up in a massive legal battle that is shaking the industry to its core. Known for his role in the iconic group Dipset, the Diplomats, Jim has been a dominant force in rap for decades. From his hit We Fly High to his contributions as a prominent member of one of the most influential rap groups in history, Jim Jones has built an empire in the music industry. However, now the same man who once took over radio stations with his anthems finds himself at the center of a serious FBI investigation that could potentially mark the end of his career. So, how did Jim Jones, a man who built his reputation on his musical talent and street credibility, find himself under such intense scrutiny? The answer lies in a major FBI sting operation that has rocked the hip-hop world. The investigation has been fueled by leaked court documents, wiretapped phone calls, and secret deals that were exposed on tape. These revelations have cast a spotlight on the rapper, who had long been associated with the streets and known for his controversial ties to criminal elements. Rumors about Jim's connections to gang activity and illicit dealings had swirled for years, but it wasn't until this sting operation that the full extent of his alleged involvement came to light. The FBI's investigation into Jim Jones is not something that happened overnight. These types of operations require months, if not years, of careful planning, gathering evidence, and following leads. According to reports, Jim Jones had been under surveillance for a long time, with federal agents zeroing in on his connections to organized crime, money laundering, and illegal business dealings. Jim's name kept coming up in investigations, targeting high-profile individuals in the hip-hop world, and this led law enforcement to dig deeper. The real turning point in the investigation came when an informant, someone with inside knowledge of both the streets and the music industry, began feeding the FBI critical information. This informant reportedly provided details about meetings, transactions, and even private conversations that allegedly involved Jim Jones. With this newfound knowledge, the feds were able to secure wiretaps on individuals linked to the case. It was these wiretaps that revealed disturbing evidence, capturing conversations that raised serious red flags. Now, you may be wondering what was said in these wiretapped conversations that got the FBI's attention. Well, the details of these conversations are shocking. According to the leaks, the recordings revealed discussions of financial transactions, coded language that seemed to reference illegal activity, and even instructions on how to handle certain business dealings. This wasn't just casual conversation. The authorities believe that Jim Jones was directly involved in coordinating criminal activities. These phone calls reportedly included talks about money laundering, criminal transactions, and even strategies for avoiding detection by law enforcement. But here's the tricky part: coded language. As we all know, hip-hop culture is known for its use of street slang and coded language. Just because someone says something vague on a phone call doesn't automatically make it illegal. However, if law enforcement can prove that these words are directly linked to specific crimes, then it becomes a serious problem. That's what the FBI is trying to do now: connect these conversations to criminal activity. If the authorities can convince a court that Jim was indeed involved in illegal acts, it could lead to serious charges. This isn't the first time Jim Jones's name has surfaced in a wiretap investigation. Back in 2019, during the trial of Tekashi 6699, Jim Jones's name was brought up in connection with a wiretapped conversation. In that instance, Jones was heard discussing violence and retaliation, and while he wasn't charged, the leak raised eyebrows. Now, in this current investigation, it seems that Jim's name is appearing once again, and this time the stakes are much higher. So what exactly is Jim Jones facing? According to sources close to the case, he could potentially face multiple serious charges, including conspiracy to commit racketeering, money laundering, aiding and abetting criminal activity, and obstruction of justice. The most serious of these charges is the possibility of a RICO, Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations charge, which is often used to target individuals who are part of criminal organizations. If prosecutors can show that Jim Jones was part of an ongoing criminal enterprise, it could lead to a lengthy prison sentence. Additionally, the alleged money laundering activities could add another layer of charges, further complicating his legal situation. But the question on everyone's Mind is, how did the feds build such a strong case? One of the key components of any federal investigation is following the money. Jim Jones has been living a lavish lifestyle in recent years, purchasing luxury cars, expensive jewelry, and maintaining a high-profile status despite his music not charting as much as it used to. So, where is all this money coming from? Federal. Agents reportedly started tracking large financial transactions linked to Jim and his associates. These transactions allegedly involved moving large sums of money through various accounts, shell companies, and even offshore entities. The feds believe these transactions were an attempt to hide the true source of the funds, which is why they've become a major focus of the investigation. In addition to tracking the money, the feds often rely on informants who are willing to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence or immunity. This has been a common tactic used by law enforcement in high-profile cases, and rumors suggest that someone close to Jim Jones may have been working with the authorities. It's unclear who the informant is, but if this theory is true, it could explain how the feds were able to gather such strong evidence. If someone within Jim's inner circle turned on him, it could have provided them with crucial information to build the case against him. As of now, Jim Jones's legal team is scrambling to determine their next steps. He could try to fight the charges in court, challenging the evidence and questioning the legality of the wiretaps. If his defense team can prove that the wiretaps were obtained improperly, there's a chance that the evidence could be thrown out. Additionally, they may argue that the conversations captured on tape were taken out of context or misunderstood, as street slang can often be misinterpreted by those outside the culture. However, there is a significant risk if Jim decides to go to trial. The federal government has a conviction rate of over 90%, and if they believe they have a strong case, they won't hesitate to push forward with charges. Another option for Jim Jones could be to take a plea deal. Federal cases rarely go to trial, as most defendants choose to accept a plea deal to avoid the risk of a long prison sentence. If the feds offer Jim a deal, he could potentially receive a lesser sentence in exchange for pleading guilty or cooperating with authorities. While this might reduce his time behind bars, it could come at a steep cost. Not only would he be admitting guilt, but his reputation and career in hip-hop could be permanently damaged. The bigger question remains, will the hip-hop community stand by Jim Jones or distance itself from him? Over the years, we've seen various responses from the rap industry when artists face legal trouble. Some, like Meek Mill, have received widespread support from fellow artists and fans. Others, like Tekashi 6ix9ine, have been abandoned after cooperating with authorities. Jim Jones has been a respected figure in hip-hop for years. But how will the culture react if he faces serious charges? Will his peers rally behind him, or will they turn their backs on him to avoid being associated with his case? Right now, Jim Jones is facing the biggest battle of his life. If the FBI truly has years of wiretaps and financial records, this could be a tough case to fight. But Jim's legal team is experienced, and they may be able to poke holes in the prosecution's argument. Whether or not the evidence is enough to secure a conviction is yet to be seen, but one thing is clear: this is far from over. The future of Jim Jones's career and freedom will depend on how this case unfolds, and we'll be following every development closely. The road ahead is uncertain for Jim Jones, but this case is about more than just him. It speaks to the larger issue of how the justice system targets high-profile figures in the hip-hop world, and how the intersection of street life, music, and the law often leads to legal troubles. For now, the question remains, will Jim Jones beat the charges, or will this mark the end of his career and his freedom? Only time will tell, but the world is watching, and the stakes have never been higher. As we continue to follow Jim Jones's legal battle, it becomes more evident that this case is not just about a rapper being caught up in the system. It's about the broader intersection of hip-hop, the justice system, and the power dynamics at play. The scrutiny that artists like Jim Jones face is not a new phenomenon. The hip-hop industry, which has long been a voice for the voiceless, often finds itself under the watchful eye of law enforcement, especially when an artist's success transcends music and reaches into the realms of business and influence. In Jim's case, his street credibility, combined with his status as a businessman and figurehead in the hip-hop world, has made him a target for investigators. The fact that he has been in the game for decades, navigating both the mainstream music industry and the more shadowy aspects of the street, means that his activities have often been under the microscope. The government's increased focus on hip-hop, especially the growing use of RICO laws and wiretaps, has made it clear that authorities see the genre as not just music, but as a potential avenue for criminal activities, even when no hard evidence exists. The case against Jim Jones could also be seen as part of a larger trend where law enforcement pursues high-profile figures, especially those from marginalized communities, under the pretext of fighting crime, when in reality it may be more about stifling influence. Hip-hop has grown into a cultural force that extends beyond music, shaping politics, fashion, social movements, and business. For someone like Jim Jones, who has ventured into various entrepreneurial activities, this makes him a figure of interest to not just the public but also to powerful entities who may not want certain voices to gain too much control or influence. If Jim Jones is ultimately convicted, it could serve as a cautionary tale for other artists who toe the line between street life and mainstream success. It might also send a message to the broader hip-hop community that even the most established and influential figures are not immune to the law's reach. Whether this case is a clear-cut matter of criminal activity or whether Jim is being unfairly targeted remains to be seen. But one thing is for sure, his fight in the courts is just beginning, and the outcome will have ripple effects across the entire hip-hop industry.